Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises here. We have a great show ahead. Busy show. We're going to have Dan Wetzel, our Tuesday friend. I mean, he's a once-a-week friend. I don't know if he wants to hang out with me the rest of the time. We're going to talk about that Oregon-Ohio State game. Did I say it's Kings of the North? It's Kings of the North. You guys know that, right? The Oregon-Ohio State game, like some coaches afterward, Jed Fish of Washington said this, being like $20 million rosters on both sides, and how Northern NIL should be viewed, because I think like it should be a positive that the North is like rising up and trying hard in football. But I'm curious how Dan thinks other schools are looking at it. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to play Big Ten SEC Pick'em. Best teams in the SEC, best teams in the Big Ten, like which one would you take? And then we look at that kind of middle tier where the back half of the playoff race is going to take shape. There's a lot of, I think, underachieving SEC teams in their tier and overachieving Big Ten teams in their tier. So we're going to just pontificate about how the SEC and the Big Ten match up in this playoff race. We also have 3 reporters for really interesting Northern teams on this show, all of whom are on the road this week. And we want to talk about those teams. First off, we'll have Zack Carpenter talking about Nebraska. Then we're going to have a Farmageddon preview. Now, Farmageddon, Kansas State, Iowa State is not until the last weekend of the regular season, but how good and how interesting are Kansas State and Iowa State right now? So we're going to talk to Ryan Gilbert about Kansas State, and we're going to talk to Alec Busse about Iowa State. That is all in this show. But we're going to start with some stuff I have about 3 Northern teams that I think are super interesting in the playoff race, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Cincinnati, and how they could factor in and maybe spring some upsets. But I do, off the top, want to do a couple news items here. We're not a news show. We're not just reacting to what happens. We want to have our own agenda, but when stuff matters in the North, we want to tell you about it too. So one thing that happened is that after we finished the show, during the show yesterday, on Monday's show, our producer, Mike Urostowski, told us that Kyle Whittingham had said that Cam Rising, the Utah quarterback, was going to be out indefinitely. And then after the show yesterday afternoon, Utah put out a release that Cam Rising, their starting quarterback, is out for the year again. He missed all of last season. He had missed previous college football seasons. And it is a terrible thing for Utah. And it already started. Should Cam Rising come back for an 8th season next year at age 26? And my opinion on that is no. He is 20-8 as a starter. He's played 30 career games over 7 years. He's had very unfortunate injury luck, and that's really too bad for him and his team. But I don't think 26-year-olds should be playing 8 years of college football. So, like, maybe that'll become a greater discussion down the line. They've got to draw the line somewhere. I know we've had old players, guys who played minor league baseball and then came back and played college football, maybe guys who went on religious missions and then came back and played college football. Like, I get it. But I do think there's a point where, like, having fully adult men playing with college kids doesn't make any sense. And Cam Rising's had a good run at this. So all the best to him. As we said on the show, we thought that Kyle Whittingham screwed it up by keeping Cam Rising in the game. He was obviously seriously injured enough that his season is over. And Kyle Whittingham didn't take him out of that game. So 20-8 as a starter is a great career record. And it's really too bad for Utah that they did not get a run at him these last 2 years with a fully healthy Cam Rising and what they could have been, because everybody thought they would have been a very legitimate contender for conference championships in the playoff with him. But I think his college football career should be done. And if the NCAA needs to make a rule, then make a rule. But like, I don't think it's like, hey, it's so cool, everybody wants to stay in college. I think it's not a thing to do. So that's what I think about that. Dan Lanning, I don't know if people are acting surprised about this, and you're going to see headlines about this on this Tuesday, that Dan Lanning, the Oregon head coach, in his news conference on Monday, like winkingly confirmed that they put 12 men on the field on purpose against Ohio State at the end. Of course they did. We knew that. Like, if you were like, did you? Of course they did. It's nice. It's certainly worth asking. Just because you know something and think something, you must take it to the person involved and get actual confirmation from them. That's called reporting. But now headlines are coming out like, oh, it's like, yeah, of course they did. It was a great play. And Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports is reporting on this Tuesday morning that he talked to an NCAA, somebody with the officials, the people at the NCAA, They might reconsider that rule a little bit, because what happens at the moment is if you have 12 men on the field, you get a 5-yard penalty, but the time that runs off the clock runs off the clock. You don't get it back. So what happened was playing 12 men gave Oregon a better chance of stopping Ohio State from getting a big play with 10 seconds left. On the play that they had 12 men on the field, Jabbar Muhammad knocked down a pass to Jeremiah Smith. And I think he could play more aggressive coverage because he had 12 defenders with him, 11 others. He was the 12th. And Ohio State lost the 4 seconds because the clock went from 10 to 6 on the play. So it was an incompletion. Ohio State did get 5 yards, but Oregon had the better chance to stop it, and they wasted time. So what the official and what Ross is saying in the piece is that maybe they would change the rule now even to say that you put the time back. So the whole point for Lanning, who found a loophole and used it, that's great coaching, is you run clock that your opponent needs the time, and you give your defense a better chance. So if they give the time back, that would close that loophole. Because then it's like, oh, you could put 12 men on the field every play if you wanted to, and it would enhance your chances of stopping them, but they would just get 5 extra yards every time, and no time would come off the clock. So that actually makes sense, even if it's only in the last 2 minutes or something, that they would change that. So you did something right and something smart as a coach when they have to change the rules to stop you from doing it. So kudos to Dan Lanning. But if you're acting like, oh my gosh, of course he did, we knew it, it's good coaching. It was I think in the heat of the moment, people might have been like, oh my gosh, that was a clown show at the end of Ohio State, Oregon. All these teams are making mistakes. Oregon had 12 guys in the field. It's like, no, Oregon had 12 guys on the field. We knew it. The other thing is that there are reports this morning that the SEC and the Big Ten are talking even more about what is being characterized in a story by USA Today, and other people have since followed, about an SEC Big Ten challenge where they would play 12 to 16 non-conference head-to-head games in the preseason. And all I want to say is that I talked to then Big Ten Commissioner Jim Delaney about this idea. I proposed it and sent letters to the SEC and the Big Ten about it, and I got an interview with Jim Delaney about it in 2007. 17 years ago, I said, do an SEC Big Ten challenge. It would make $1 gazillion. It would take over September. And the thing is that it would be awesome about it is that it would make Purdue and Mississippi State really matter, because it's a point in the SEC Big Ten challenge. We do it in basketball. It's not like I invented it. We do it in basketball. So why don't we do it in football? And here's the thing. Teams think they need to have opponents scheduled out for the future. All they need is dates. What they really need is dates. So you could set it up ahead of time. And there's 18 teams in the Big Ten and there's 16 in the SEC. So 2 teams in the SEC each year would have to sit it out. But if you said over the next 4 years to every team, these are your 4 dates. You get 2 home games and 2 road games. They're going to be played in 2025. You're going to play at home on September 12th. And then in 2026, you're going to play on the road on September 4th or whatever it would be. And then in the offseason, you would know who are the 8 teams that have to be at home and the teams that have to be on the road, right? And then you pair them up based on interest, based on history, based on how good they're projected to be. And then you have a TV show in the offseason announcing what the Big Ten SEC playoff preseason challenge games are going to be. And you blow that out. And then I think you would spread it over 3 weekends. That if you're playing, 16 games, you could do 5, 5, 6, and you build up to it, and you get a point for each one, and you see who wins. You could sell that out the wazoo for sponsorship deals, goes to paying the players. The TV ratings would be through the roof, and it would engender in the Big Ten what I think already exists in the SEC, which is conference pride. So the thing that I liked about it was the idea of Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan and Nebraska and Iowa fans actively rooting for Indiana and Purdue and Northwestern and Rutgers and Maryland, because now you really care. If you have a Big Ten team that you like, you really care if Rutgers beats Vanderbilt. And otherwise, do you care? We try to get you to care on KOTN, but do you? You really care. Can you imagine? It's not just Alabama, Wisconsin, but it's for a point. It's not just Texas, Michigan, but it's for a point. And by the way, right, neither of those games were equal games. That was not, if Bama's the third best team in the SEC, Wisconsin's not the third best team in the Big Ten. Texas is the best team in the SEC. Michigan's not the best team in the Big Ten. But if you would do it in the offseason before, you could have paired that up in a way to go head to head. So anyway, they should have been doing it for 17 years. Welcome to the past. So of course they should do it. And then if the Big 12 and the ACC think all the air's getting sucked out of the room, do a Big 12 ACC challenge, because we do multiple conference ones in basketball. Just set the dates and then figure out the matchups. It's too easy. I laid it out for you 17 years ago. Let's do teams that matter in the playoff race, because they could play spoilers. And they're not only spoilers. There's 3 teams I want to talk about before we get to Zack Carpenter talking about Nebraska. They're all 4-2 right now and 2-1 in conference play. So that's not out of anything. But I'm also not anticipating that Michigan, Wisconsin, and Cincinnati will be in the thick of the playoff race come November. I don't think they're all going to win out until then. But I think they could win some really crucial games that start with Michigan. Michigan has 4 games left that really get my attention and should get your attention. They're at Illinois on Saturday. They're home against Oregon on November 2nd. They're at Indiana on November 9th. And then they are at Ohio State on November 30th. Sharon Moore confirmed on Monday that Jack Tuttle will start this week against Illinois. He came in late after the start of the Washington game, and everybody thought, okay, Jack Tuttle's the new starter, the 3rd starting quarterback for Michigan this year. He confirmed that. He did say they're still going to have some packages for Alex Orji. They named Josiah Stewart a full-time captain this week. That's how well that defensive end has played for the Michigan defense. So it's just one of these things where, is Michigan going to make the playoff? My guess would be no. Could Michigan win 2 of these games, 3 of these games that really matter, and throw some stuff off? Absolutely. Michigan is a prove it, we're real game for both Illinois and Indiana. And if Illinois and Indiana both get to 11, if either of them gets to 11-1 with a win over Michigan, that is a huge playoff resume for them. So these games, so this Illinois game, we'll do it as part of a big game breakdown on Thursday. This Illinois-Michigan game this week is huge. Nebraska-Indiana this week is huge, but then it's going to be also huge for Indiana. They have Michigan and Ohio State still on the schedule. So I'm curious about how strong of a playoff resume a 10-2 Indiana would have. An 11-1 Indiana is a very, very strong playoff resume, but Michigan is going to be a pivot game for them regardless. So that is a gigantic game, and so Michigan is going to really matter. Michigan is going to play at least 4 games in the back half of the schedule here that is going to get your attention. Not necessarily because of Michigan's season, but what Michigan can do to other teams' seasons. Okay, keep Michigan in mind. Another 4-2 team that's 2-1 in its conference is Wisconsin. Wisconsin has 4 that really matter. Have they figured it out on offense? Will Pauling, their excellent receiver, left the game against Rutgers last weekend. Luke Fickell said on Monday that he should be fine, so that's great news. Wisconsin, 4 games to get your attention. Home against Penn State on October 26th, at Iowa on November 2nd, home against Oregon November 16th, at Nebraska November 23rd. Again, Iowa, Nebraska, they're going to play at the end of the year against each other on Black Friday. One of them, if they both win out until then, they're both in the playoff race for that last game. Now, Nebraska does have a trip to Ohio State in 2 weeks. So do I think Nebraska's going to win out? I don't know, but like Wisconsin has a chance to sort of eliminate last hopes of playoff contention for Iowa and Nebraska. But what really matters, and I thought about this in the preseason because I did pick Ohio State and Penn State to play in the Big Ten title game, but I also picked Oregon in the preseason to beat Ohio State. So it's like, well, how does all this stuff happen? It's this Oregon trek now where they have 3 Midwestern games in their next 6 on the road. That they have to go to Michigan and Wisconsin. I think a potential, what may decide who plays in the Big Ten title game is whether Wisconsin can beat one of Oregon and Penn State. And I'm going to predict right now that they will win one of those games. They did not do a great job at home against Alabama. I do think some of the things they've figured out on offense are real. They had some bad injury luck and some bad game management in that Alabama game that I think they should have learned some lessons from. And depending which one it is, I think the team that loses at Wisconsin might miss the Big Ten title game. So that's where I am on that. Like, one Oregon loss wouldn't do that because they'd still have a head-to-head against Ohio State. Like, that's not it. But I'm just saying it could send Oregon on a path. And if Oregon is already I'm in on Oregon. I'm not locked in on undefeated Oregon. And I'm not locked in 100% on Big Ten championship game participant Oregon. So what I think Wisconsin showed in its last two games is that it is good enough to get in somebody's way. Pay attention to Wisconsin, these 4 games. The other one is Cincinnati. And Cincinnati is also 4-2. They are 2-1 in the Big 12. The games that I'm looking at are October 26th at Colorado, and then really the 2 are back-to-back, also on the road, at Iowa State November 16th, at Kansas State on November 23rd. We know BYU's schedule is kind of softer, and we have been talking a lot, and we'll talk more later in the show about what Farmageddon, Kansas State, Iowa State could be in the last game of the regular season. But if they look ahead at all, Cincinnati is good enough. They just went on the road and won at UCF in a game where they didn't play that well. They couldn't really run the ball. Brendan Sorsby, their quarterback, had a bad first half and a much better second half. He threw 2 picks in the first half. Like, they've won on the road when they haven't been great. And I do think they are efficient enough and balanced enough offensively. I think their offensive line is good enough. I think they have some playmakers led by Dante Corleone at defensive tackle. On defense, they will step up and bite somebody. And so this could get in the way of Farmageddon being everything it could be if Cincinnati beats one of those 2 teams in their place. November 16th, November 23rd. So that's 3 good teams that, they're not out of the playoff race of their own right. 2 losses at this point of the year. I mean, run the table, win your final 6, and 10-2 for any of those 3 teams is a very competitive playoff resume. But what I think they have the ability to do is really get in somebody else's way. You know what that means? That means great, interesting games in the North for us to talk about and you to care about. And isn't that what we're here for? Okay. SEC Big Ten Challenge. I just want a small cut. I'll be a free consultant. I just want to be in the room. What I think I'm actually going to do is we may do a separate video this week. You can look for it in our channel with me laying out what the Big Ten SEC Challenge could and should be, because I did when Jim Delaney said, like, thanks, but no thanks, weird guy. I did play it out on a video game system, and I would be up at 2:00 in the morning, letting the computer simulate the game. And I was like covering the game like it was a real game. And then I wrote write-ups of who won the SEC Big Ten Challenge for Cleveland.com in the offseason of 2007, because that's just how I rolled back then. So let me in the room. I have ideas, and I'll lay it out in a separate video. Let's talk real football now, though. Real football is almost always better than fake video game football. Zack Carpenter covers Nebraska. Nebraska going to Indiana this weekend and then going to Ohio State next weekend. It is go time for the Cornhuskers. Let's talk about where they are and where they could be with Zack on KOTN. Joined now by Zack Carpenter, old friend of the program, great Nebraska writer. Zack, we're going to talk about the Cornhuskers because this is huge for them the next 2 weeks. But just when the people get done with this interview and think, oh, what a smart young man he is, how can they find you?
Well, first off, thank you to the hypothetical listeners and watchers for thinking that and believing that and knowing that. Yeah. Zack Carpenter, I mean, we're at InsideNebraska.com. Actually, Doug, the last time I was on your show, you're the one who said InsideNebraska.com. I'm like, it's actually Nebraska.rivals.com. You're like, no, when I put it in the URL, it takes me right to the site. We're like, oh, we didn't know that. So they must have fixed that. I just remembered that right now as we're talking. But also Twitter at Zack_Carp, ZACK_Carp, and at Nebraska Rivals on Twitter and Instagram. We're building a following on Instagram. We're at over 6,000 on Instagram, approaching 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. So those are a couple of my babies. So I'm very, very proud to see them grow up.
Awesome. And he's working so hard, he's lost his voice, but we're going to have him talk about Nebraska anyway. So, Zach, I think a lot of people in the preseason, we on this show certainly did, looked ahead to Nebraska, Ohio State next week and thought, oh, man, could that be an undefeated showdown in like an ideal world? And instead, Ohio State and Nebraska now both have one loss. And the undefeated team in this equation is Indiana, the team that Nebraska is traveling to this week. It's not a playoff eliminator, but it is a game with large playoff stakes, I think. Nebraska fans, are they thinking about it that way, or is playoff stuff in mid-October not really on their mind and they just want the Cornhuskers to just go play a good game against a good team?
Yeah, Nebraska fans just want this team to stop effing up on special teams. That's like the big thing. I mean, first off, Indiana, Nebraska, 6-0 Indiana versus 5-1 Nebraska, almost a top 25 matchup. Like, who would have thought? I think of the Paul Rudd meme or whatever. Like, who would have thought? Not us. Yeah. It's like, I actually had this pegged as a Nebraska loss coming into the season, even though I had Nebraska. I had Nebraska at 9-3 overall, but I had them dropping this one and the Ohio State game back to back. Doing your preseason poll, I think I had Indiana 14th, but they were picked like 17th out of 18. And I remember listening to you and Bill Landis, like, Indiana's better than the 17th finish in the Big Ten, and they had the schedule. So it's not surprising me that this is a higher quality opponent than most people would have thought. But I would not have predicted for it to be this high profile of a game with big noon kickoff in town and everything. But Nebraska, I think I just got off the radio hit with Jim Coyle over at the
we don't acknowledge other shows.
Exactly. Just your guess. Yeah. But he was saying some that I'm like, oh, I feel that. Like, Indiana fans are sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. They're having a good time. But like, so many fan bases are like, but this is why it's not all it's cracked up to be.
There is a but for Nebraska. Nebraska fans are feeling the but right now.
Yeah, I feel like maybe it's a vocal minority, but that vocal minority is very loud. Of like, but this is like what I keep saying is there's no fan base that hates winning more than Nebraska's fan base, because you're always gonna have something to point to that's wrong, like or some sort of issue, and whether it's the inconsistencies in the defense, even though there's not even inconsistencies, they just had a bad game against Illinois when they had a game plan that didn't work, and Illinois' offense out schemed them, out coached them, and they lost a ranked game in overtime by one score at home to a quality team, and the special teams but the special teams and the offensive line are the two areas where it's like, I think Nebraska fan base has the most worries. On the offensive line, a lot of it is the injury to the left tackle.
So offensive line, there's a preseason injury at left tackle, right? And then can it continue to snowball a little bit? Like, do you think the offensive line play is an issue?
I don't think it's as much of an issue. I don't think it's been as much of an issue the last 2 years as many think it is or think it was. I mean, even in 2022, they're giving up the most sacks in the Big Ten, but a lot of that was the offensive scheme, offensive play design, where they're asking their offensive line to do something that wasn't their strength, of holding up longer and pass pro for these downfield long routes and longer developing plays. Yeah. And then now they're asking the offensive line to be more balanced in terms of run blocking, which is their specialty, and pass pro, with a quarterback who is able to manipulate the pocket with his footwork and create some extra throwing windows and create those extra tenths of a second to create something downfield. But the offensive line, the starting left tackle, torn ACL in the preseason. He was actually battling. That was actually a battle for the starting left tackle spot. And then the guy earns the starting job by default. Essentially, he plays well. He played well in the first few games. Then he goes down with a significant hamstring injury. He's probably done for the season. I haven't heard anything that would indicate anything else. Their left guard, who's their best NFL. He's like as ceiling as a day 2 NFL draft pick. He's had some off-field disciplinary stuff that has kept him out, either out or now. Well, now he's the backup left guard. So you're down 2 guys there. So you're starting redshirt freshman at left tackle, but he's played well. I mean, Purdue tried to get Kydron Jenkins on him one-on-one, beat him a couple times, but for the most part, we didn't talk about him at all. It's like when you're not talking about an offensive lineman, then he must have done a good job because there was nothing to criticize him for.
So it's not that the offensive line's not going to necessarily lose this game for Nebraska against Indiana. That's not where it is, probably, right? Is that fair to say?
I don't think so. I don't think the offensive line allowing too many pressures has been a big bugaboo so far.
So then what's the special team stuff? I would guess Matt Rule's the kind of coach where special teams would be locked down. Why are people freaking out about this stuff?
Yeah, it's surprising, right? Because he that's exactly what you would expect. But historically, I think his special teams units have been inconsistent. But the starting kicker, starting kicker had a groin injury in the offseason, and then he had to have surgery. They were hoping he was going to be back and healthy. He was going to be a second year starting kicker. He started as a true freshman and had a good year for a true freshman. Yeah. Kicked a 55-yarder, which is a freshman record at Nebraska. It was like second longest kick all time. But had some inconsistencies of a college football kicker and a true freshman college football kicker at that. He gets hurt. When he does come back, he's early in the season, he's missing kicks, and they tell him, go get right, and come back like when we're healthy. Essentially, like we're not gonna keep playing you. The guy who steps in to fill his place, he has a big leg. He has a really strong leg, but keeps missing wide left. They had to replace their long snapper in the offseason because their long snapper went to the NFL. He was a high quality snapper, and you might laugh at that, but that's been an issue. It's been an issue on field goal kicks. They had 3 misses against Purdue. I think one was just a wide left miss. One was a block. I think there might have been 2 blocks. Now that I think about it, but 3 misses altogether. And on 2 of those, the snaps either were way up high or boom, hit off the ground. And the holder did a hell of a job just to get the thing down. They had one against Illinois. They had it was 24-24 in the fourth quarter, and long snap goes back. It's not the greatest snap and not the greatest hold. I believe the laces were the right, like Ace Ventura, pet detective, laces out, Dan. Yeah. And he misses it wide left on a go-ahead attempt in the fourth quarter. And the margins are so small for Nebraska in these games that you have to tighten those up if you want to beat a team like an Indiana or be competitive against an Ohio State.
Okay. So if it comes down to a field goal, Nebraska's kicking for the win. Don't hold your breath.
I wouldn't.
Dylan Raiola. And the guys he's throwing to, Jamal Banks, Isaiah Nayor, the running back situation has come around. Dowdle I like that guy that guy runs hard, right? He had a fumble early and kind of got in trouble for the fumble, but now he's back. He's the guy. How good do you think the skill is for Nebraska? And have we seen the full offense yet? Or do you feel like they've been easing Dylan Raiola into this, and now these next 2 weeks, Indiana and Ohio State off of a bye week, how much more could we see from this Nebraska offense?
Well, first off, remember when you're talking about Nebraska this time last year, all the turnovers, they had approximately 1 billion fumbles and 500 million lost fumbles. Yep. That Dante Dowdell fumble you talk about, that's their only lost fumble of the year. That happened in the second quarter in the first game against UTEP. They've had 4 fumbles all year. That was their only lost fumble. 3 interceptions. It's miraculous. The fact that we had the turnaround. They were like -7 in turnover margin at this point last year, halfway through the season. Now they're at +6, I believe. Okay. So that's going to eliminate a lot of your issues if you can just protect the ball. But I don't think they've been easing Dylan in. I don't think they've been easing him in at all. Like maybe over the first few weeks, but that Illinois game is where we really saw it. Like, okay, this is Dylan's game. I mean, but from the spring game, when he started the spring game, you'd see the difference immediately. Like in the spring game is when you saw the difference the most between the quarterbacks. You had last year's starter, Heinrich Harburg, another freshman, Danny Kalen, and then Dylan. And you notice the difference when like series to series, where every time Dylan Raiola was back there at shotgun or under center, he is surveying the defense. He's signaling to his receivers, he's shifting his running back from the right side to the left side for because he knows where the blitz is coming from, knows where the pressure is coming from, slides the offensive line, he changes the plays. And you just notice such a difference where, okay, wow, they trust this kid's 19. He was 18 at the time of the spring game, but that's translated over to the fall now, where they trust this kid to run their NFL style offense. It's fun to see the process.
So you think based on what you saw in the spring game so far, Dylan Raiola has been better than you thought he would be, been not as good, or been about what you thought he would be?
Everything that's happened is exactly what I expected.
Okay.
Like,
and people can find, right, the overtime against Illinois got a little loose, right? And that to me was maybe the one moment of like, oh, this guy's a freshman. But most of the time, it's what you're saying. He has not looked like a freshman.
I don't think he's looked like a freshman at all until maybe the Rutgers game, where but I think that a lot of that was to do with what Greg Schiano and that Rutgers defense was doing. That was the hardest challenge. I mean, the Illinois defense was a difficult challenge, and he passed that. I mean, the overtime possession that went haywire, and I know you see like the casual the like looseness, I think, with the ball in that overtime session. But if you look at the offensive line, they did a simple stunt on the left side. And that was the first game where the left tackle went down earlier in the game. They have a true freshman step up and just gets confused. Him and the left guard, they just get confused by a simple stunt, and then boom, sack. I think it was a false start, sack. And then all of a sudden you're facing 4th and 42. Right. And it's like, okay, this is a disaster. And he had to throw. I talk about that missed field goal against Illinois. That came on 4th and 3. The play before, 24-24, like 5 minutes left. And he just barely overthrows their number 3 tight end in the end zone. It was a great play design, great scheme, strategy, and all that. And he misses a throw by like a foot in the end zone, has a step. That could have changed everything. The narrative that people are, if Nebraska's 6-0, I don't think it's, Anyway. Okay.
So Raiola's the real deal. They do have guys for him to get the ball to. Barney is a Usain Bolt when they give him the ball in different ways. So everybody should watch for that. So bottom line, Zach, is this. How big of a difference? It feels like a monumental difference to me for the Nebraska program between winning this game and losing this game. They're going to be about a touchdown underdog in Bloomington. But if they win this and then come to Columbus with Ohio State coming off a loss, I think there's going to be a lot of watch out for Nebraska. And if they lose, then it's like, okay, they're not ready for this yet. Like Indiana is the team to watch this year. I think this is a gigantic game for Nebraska.
Especially perception-wise and just confidence building-wise. I mean, 6-0 going to 5-1. And if Nebraska loses this game, they're going 5-7 for sure. Sky's falling. Are we ever going to get back to a bowl game ever again? Everything's going to start. It almost doesn't matter how you lose. If you lose 50-0 or 28-24, like another one possession or one score loss, it almost doesn't matter. But I think you're right. I think you're on the money. It's a massive game. It's a massive swing game. The Rutgers game was the biggest game of the season so far. Yeah. And I think this one supersedes that, because if you can get that monkey off your back, that's okay. We got the 6 wins. You get the fan base like, all right, take a deep breath. We're getting to the postseason. Now we're going big game hunting. Okay. Yeah. But that's not what we want. That's not the ceiling, but we got that off our back. You guys can calm down about that. That's not our goal. Our goal is not get to a bowl game. Like that's this year, for this season, for this team with this quarterback. That's a floor. That's a low floor, is getting to a postseason game. Okay. But if you want to get the fans to calm down a little bit and just okay, we're getting to the postseason. Now we go to Ohio State. Now we go take it to them and try to have it be a one-score game going into the fourth quarter. And if that happens, you got your shot.
Okay. So short answer on this is, if Nebraska plays its game, the team you've seen, will it win, or do they have to do something more than they've shown so far?
I think if you get a B level on special teams and Nebraska plays its game, I think they'll win, because if you get pressure on the quarterback, we've seen, I mean, you know this, if you get pressure on even the best quarterbacks in college football or the Big Ten, they're not going to be the same. And that's one of the strengths that Nebraska can bring, is bring that chaotic defense, chaotic looks, chaotic pressures, and stunts, and a variety of pass rushers, because this is the depth and variety on that defensive line is one of this entire team's strengths. So if you can do that on defense, mix it up a little bit, I think they have the offensive firepower to keep up with an Indiana and pull one out on the road.
Okay. He's Zack Carpenter. If you're interested in Nebraska, and if you care about Northern football, you should be. It's a super important and interesting program for the North. Follow Zack. He knows what's up. Zack, thanks for fighting through the voice, man, and joining us here on KOTN.
Yeah, Doug. Appreciate you having me.
For that, we'll talk more. Landis and I will talk more about Indiana, Nebraska. We'll talk more on Thursday. Landis and I will do that, I think, as part of our big game breakdown on Thursday. So look for that then. Now we'll talk to our friend Dan Wetzel right after this on KOTN. Back on Kings of the North, joined by Dan Wetzel, as we always are every Tuesday. Dan, good to see you as always.
Good to be here, Doug. Appreciate it. Good to see you. You got the sweater vest weather coming here. It's the start.
You felt that, right? I walked out the other day, and I was like, it's here.
Quarter zip. Half zip.
It's here,
quarter zip.
right?
Yeah.
You got Trussell on your mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
You walked out, right? You get that a little bit, the bones get a little chill, which they don't get that in the South. That's another part of being in the North. Your bones getting chilled in October. Dan, I want to do some SEC Big Ten stuff with you, and it's a lot about perception stuff, but I also do like talk about money with you, because you are a very smart financial person.
I wish.
It felt like this Oregon, Ohio State $20 million roster thing has been a little bit of a thing since that game. Jed Fish at Washington brought it up in particular. I think Matt Rule at Nebraska also talked about NIL this week. But Jed Fish, to paraphrase, said something like, that's what two $20 million rosters look like, right? When you see what Oregon and Ohio State put on the field, and both of those teams were certainly supplemented. They were not necessarily built through the portal. I don't think that would be fair to say, but they both started transfer portal quarterbacks. Derek Harmon for Oregon might have been their best player in that game. He is a transfer portal guy. Quinshon Judkins. Like, we can run through the list of the guys who really mattered. When people in the North are talking about that, I can't tell. And this is what I want to ask you about. When someone says a $20 million NIL roster for a Northern team, do they say that with admiration, with envy, with aspiration, or are they giving it as an excuse? Are they almost kind of making fun of that team because they had to pay for all their good players? I can't tell if Northern teams think paying $20 million for your roster is a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, depends who's saying it. First off, the NIL can be retaining your roster. That's the big part for Ohio State, right? They retained all these guys.
Ryan Day said that 2 years ago. It's going to take $13 million to retain, to keep what you have. Yes,
stay out of the NFL.
Absolutely.
I'm going to butcher the numbers, but I did a story. You can look it up last year before the NFL draft. There was an average of about 15 or so, sometimes as many as 130 early entry candidates to the NFL draft from like 2014 to 19 or something like that.
Okay.
And that number was down to like 44 last year.
Okay.
So many guys are saying, now look, you're going to get your Caleb Williams. Yeah, you're going to be the number one pick. You're gone. Right. But when
Marvin
you get
Harrison Jr. left Ohio State. Yeah.
You're going top 5. Fine. But once you get past the 50, maybe the 20 guys with first round grades, and they don't all get picked first round, you're looking at like 15, 20 guys who are saying, yeah, I'll go pro. What college football has done with NIL is keep your guys who are going, hey, I'm going to be a 3rd rounder, a 4th rounder. I'll play another year of college football. I'm making a good deal here. You'd make more in the pros, but they enjoy it. That's one of the best things that has happened for all of college football is you're keeping talent. Yeah. And instead of everyone's not just I got to get in the league because I got no money. It's like, hey, we're going to be fine. You know, my family's going to be fine, all of that. I feel like I'm getting a fair deal here. So a lot of what Ohio State spent was keeping those guys and getting those guys to come back. So college coaches are saying it out of envy, excuse, and to light a fire under their
boosters, administration.
Donors. Yes. And so there's one thing, Doug, you've covered college football a long time. Me too. No one has ever lost a recruit. Okay. No one has ever recruited a player and said, you know, at the end of the day, they just liked Ohio State more than us. Or they just, you know what? They just really loved Rocky Top and they wanted to go there instead of our school. It's, you know how that worked. They got to the uncle. They did this. They did that. They were able to swing. There was money. Every excuse, every coach, like, I'm not saying never, but most of the time there's an excuse why the kid didn't come to you. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know whether it's a coping mechanism. Like, well, that girl wasn't that. I didn't like her anyway.
I didn't like her anyway.
Yeah. Why don't even know why I asked her out. Like, I didn't even know what I was doing. Or, you know, she must be blind. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. So whatever it is, I don't know whether it's that, but in the history of college football, everyone's cheating. You never lose a recruit. Blah, 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 blah. And sometimes it's true, by the way. Okay. Sometimes it's true.
No, that's the thing. That's why they can say it, because sometimes it is true. Yes.
Sometimes it is true. Yeah. So-and-so got a Dodge Charger. Look at this. You got to see what's going on over there. So this is what they say. So this is an excuse of being able to say, look, man, we'd have those guys, but they're paying them more. Now, in this case, they may know that because the player could go and you're down to 2 or 3 schools and say, look, I need $1 million next year.
Right.
And you're sitting there going, I'm paying $1 million for that. I'll pay you 500. Now the kid could be bluffing. He could be lying. Right. You don't know. But they're in the coaches. Oh, they paid $1 million for that kid. That's where we're getting these 20 million figures. So the coach is saying, you're at Washington. You go, why aren't you as good as Oregon? Well, they're paying 20 million and I only got 7 million to spend, or I got 5 million. And you guys got to pony up more if you want to be that. So I think it's a little bit. Is there a sheepishness though to that? I think that's what you're getting to.
Like are Oregon and Ohio State to be admired, or is it like, oh, well, those guys, I mean, I can't, like I think teams simultaneous. I think Washington, when they say that, and I'm not criticizing Jed Fish at all here. I think they're simultaneously saying we kind of wish we could be more like that, and also saying their success doesn't count quite as much because they're just paying for it.
Yeah. And so I guess I would equate this to, what if you're a Yankees fan?
Right. That's where we are with this sport. And it's not like we don't have models. So yes, if you're a Yankees fan, that's a great example.
You apologize if you're a Yankees fan and you win the World Series, or you just enjoy winning the World Series. Yankee fans, I know, just enjoy winning the World Series, and it's your problem. You live in a craptastic town out there, and you don't live in New York. That's how they look at it.
I think it's possible we are now entering the world, Dan, that will make everybody a little more happy, because so you understand this better than I do. In the past, this was happening at least to some degree anyway, but if you said it out loud, you were accusing somebody of cheating without being able to prove it. So people didn't say it out loud as much. It was more whispers, but it was the thing that percolated under college football, and I never liked it. I didn't like percolating cheating as an excuse for why teams win. We know they're cheating. Nobody's stopping them, but that's why they win. I hated that part of college football, but that was there, right?
Right. Absolutely. It was an endless thing. And that's what everyone said. We can't do it. You know how these guys, this guy's like, you're like, well, what's the details? You know, turn them in. And a lot of schools do turn them in and they can't prove it. That's the rules were easily, but yes, that's so a huge part of college football. Now it's similar. It's a little bit of scorn.
But we can say it. So when you can say it, this is like anything. When something's happening, do you want to keep it under the table and whisper about it? Or do you want to allow it, regulate it, and tax it? It's like anything. So this is not that much different than a weed dispensary being down on the corner, right? And you can go in there and buy it now rather than having to buy it from a dealer. So when you're Washington and anybody like that who's not Ohio State and Oregon, they can make a valid excuse, but Ohio State and Oregon don't have to apologize because they're not breaking any rules. So I think this is a new best of both worlds. Yankees fans don't apologize, but while the Guardians are playing the Yankees in the playoffs, they can say number 1 payroll, number 26 payroll. Right. If we lose, it's understandable. Right. But Yankees fans aren't going to apologize if they win. I much prefer this conversation, and I'm glad the North is having it rather than Jed Fish having to talk about Alabama and Georgia because nobody in the North is doing it. Good for Oregon and Ohio State for doing it, and maybe Nebraska, Washington, Michigan, Penn State, everybody else. James Franklin has already talked about it, right? He's talked about it in the past. We've got to level up. Good. They have Northern examples to follow, but in the meantime, they can also use them as an excuse and throw a little bit of shade. Yay!
Yeah, it's a little shade. And I think it's because people want to believe that everyone wants to be the underdog, right? I remember reading the story about the nepotism in Hollywood and actresses. And like, okay, somebody gets a role as an actress because she's beautiful or whatever. No, I'm a good actor too, right? It's like, yeah, but it also helped that your dad was the producer and you look like a, but they don't want that. So And when you talk to coaches, right, the first person they'll tell you, they had some guy becomes like a really good tight end. Oh, no one was recruiting him. We found him. We developed. Like they get all excited. Yeah, but the guy throwing him the ball, right, was like went 100 for 100 at the Manning Passing Academy. Like, so you got one guy who's a walk-on that turned out to be a good player. He's also surrounded by everyone else. There should be no apology. This is the rule, okay? And it's a weird spot this sport is in. I may have mentioned this on a previous episode, but I was talking to a old school Michigan football fan last spring, and he's like, I can't stand what the NIL and the transfer portal has done to the sport. And I was like, without NIL and the transfer portal, you don't win the national title.
Right.
You're non-competitive. Yeah. You are getting blown out by teams in the South. Now you transfer portal in some. Hey, we got this nickelback, we got this lineman, we fill some gaps, and you keep Blake Corum and Cornelius John, right? Why do they have 18 players from last year's team in the NFL right now? Because they kept them an extra year, because they paid them. It's good. If you're a Michigan fan, you're like, we can finally compete. Because one of the things that I don't want to hear, and I don't want to hear it from any Big Ten school, is, well, Alabama's got all the money. Hold on a second.
Anymore. That's not true anymore.
The schools in the Big Ten are bigger.
Right.
You don't have money at Nebraska. You don't have money at Michigan State, like Washington. Boy, if only there was $1 or $2 up in Seattle that you could maybe tap it. Now you got to get it. Okay. But there's no Seattle in Alabama.
Yeah.
That does not exist.
That sounds like a license plate or a bumper sticker. There's no Seattle in Alabama.
And the funny part is both sides of that would applaud it. Right?
Yeah.
Both Seattle and Alabama would prefer that there's no Seattle in Alabama. But
you could sell a sticker in both
sell
towns.
That sticker. Yeah. The Alabama people, we don't want Seattle. Seattle say we don't want Alabama. But if you're let's take Michigan State, right?
Yeah.
You don't have as much money as the other schools. Why? You've got billionaires. It's a bunch of billionaires that come out of Michigan State. You got a huge alumni network. You have tons of success. You can raise the money. In the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to spend money on college football, and they did, I'm not talking about to the players. Let's say you're biting all the rules. It was a passive dollar. You had to build an opulent facility. You had to build a locker.
Or it was a cheating dollar.
or as a cheating dollar.
Money in a paper bag and giving it straight to a player.
But institutionally, if you're not cheating,
right.
you had to build facilities. You then had to hope that over the course of years, you would get a few more unofficial visits and get a little bit better player and a little bit better player and a little bit better player. Now you have an active dollar. You can go in and say, I want this receiver. Okay.
Because here's the thing that I would say in the past, and I'll just say it out loud, right? This is what we're talking about. I don't think the South ever had more money from donors and boosters than the North in college football.
Agreed.
But they had more cheating money, and they had more active cheating money. And their donors, they had active paper bag dollars that, whether their administration and coaches directed it or the boosters and donors were just more willing to do it, the active paper bag cheating dollar got the South more players. Now, if we're beyond that, and it's active dollars versus active dollars, but it's not paper bag cheating dollars, the North can absolutely compete, if not be better, if not win.
Notre Dame, they got a lot of dollars, right? You got a lot of dollars. You got an NBC deal. You also have the possibility of real, like, what do they call true NIL? Okay, right? Notre Dame, they have other problems. Like, you can't just transfer anybody in and different things, but they now have money. You can spend money. Notre Dame's not broke, right? So all the stuff, you could go active dollar. Schools can make jumps much quicker than they could in the past, because it's not brick and mortar. Hope we impress. But you know what? Ohio State just built a better locker room too. So is it really that good? Like every year, this is the best facility I've ever seen. Now you can spend the money. You take a look at Vanderbilt. Okay. Vanderbilt last year brought in 51 new players through the transfer portal and high school recruiting. They went out and spent money. They rebuilt their offensive line. They got 3 starters off of from Mississippi State, UTEP, they bring in Pavea, Diego Pavea from New Mexico State. He was a hell of a player last year. He's like our favorite at New Mexico State. He played the same way, just no one was watching. He's in New Mexico State. They spent money, and all of a sudden, it's not that they're better. They've been better in that day than Alabama, but their team is not weak, and they don't need a 7-year plan. If you watch the Alabama game, they had the ball 42 minutes. They were that offensive line physically dominated Alabama. That can't be done overnight 5 years ago. It can now. Vanderbilt has many disadvantages compared to the other SEC. Money isn't it. They don't have a ton of fans, but they got a lot of money.
They were never going to cheat.
They weren't going to cheat. Now,
but now that's not cheating.
So I look at, if you're Ohio State, sure, we spent $20 million. Who cares? That's our $20 million. Now I understand the perceptions. Like, people aren't comfortable with that yet. But you're like,
get comfortable.
Get comfortable and be like, what do I care? Because what do I care that we spent $20 million? We got a great team. We're going to win the national title.
Win.
You raise your own money. None of these schools are broke.
In the meantime, I think it is viewed as pressure. Like, well, they spent it. They better win because they spent it. So that's like the only way it could be a negative. But it's not like, sorry for trying. Pressure. Sorry, we're trying hard.
You got to go to these boosters. That $20 million is not institutionalized. It's not coming from TV. So that $20 million is coming from boosters. And you're the guy that said, hey, man, hey, Doug, I need you to lean in $100,000 on this kid. Right. And you go, all right, I'll do it. And the kid catches 2 passes and quits the team 6 games in. And you're like, and then you come back, hey, man, we need your $100,000 or your $1 million or whatever you're paying. You're like, dude, come on, man. We went 8-4. Like, if you're Ryan Day, you get $20 million right now. Let's say they lose to Penn State and Michigan, and you're going back going, hey, guys, I need more money. And you're like, I'm paying you more money.
Which is also why that's nuts. Well, why this whole system is nuts. And like, the more we get to a streamlined actionable revenue sharing, it's like, in the pros, you got to do that with your owner. If you're the GM and you build a team and you spend all this money and you spend the owner's money and you're bad, then the GM's going to get fired. But it's only one person. It's not 12 different donors you're answering to. You're an author. How many books have you written?
I just think I finished 16.
16. How do you have time to write books in between all the talk?
Well, many of them are for middle schoolers, so they're not that long. So that's I'm kind of cheating.
What a racket. My God, you nailed it. Look at you. Well, you're a freaking genius.
Caitlin Clark coming out next spring.
But it's lovely. If you have a young reader, a young sports fan in your life, you absolutely should be reading Dan Wetzel books.
Athletes. Yeah.
Like Matt Christopher. You read Matt Christopher books when you were a kid, right?
I did.
And like and then like Lupica did it for a while, but like you're like a modern day Matt Christopher.
These are like little bios. Yeah, we got,
but come on.
Patrick
you're
Mahomes,
changing lives.
LeBron, Steph Curry. Yeah.
You're changing lives and you're shaping young minds. And also you're coming on the show and ranting about college football with me.
You know how hard it is to get an 11-year-old off TikTok to read a book? Let's just say the book business could be doing better. The young adult book business could be doing better. Damn, TikTok's killing us.
We'll make this into a TikTok promoting it. So here's the thing. This, to me, I wonder if this is chapter 1 of the Northern Revival, right? This $20 million game.
Hell yeah.
You could go to ADs, university presidents, but donors, boosters at Penn State, Washington, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, who watched that game, who watched Oregon and Ohio State play that game and said, okay, is that what it takes? And they go to their head coach and say, is that what it takes? What do you need to be that? And they say, this is what we need. And here comes the money because it's there. You've got to activate it. I thought Ohio State, Oregon lived up to the hype. I thought it was probably top to bottom from beginning to end, a better played game than Alabama, Georgia. But I thought it was a really important game for the North because you could see how the money was spent. And we're going to get to something here in a second. But I thought it did exactly what it needed to do for Northern college football. What did you think of that game, and how do you think it's perceived?
All right, quickly. Chapter 1 to me is Michigan's One More Year Fund from about 15 months ago that got Corum, Zach Center, all those guys to return.
In fact, now listen, just be honest. Be honest. Did you already start this book? I'm like talking about a hypothetical book.
No,
You're like, I'm 6 chapters in, Doug.
No.
Sorry, brother.
No, I'm all about Caitlin Clark. Okay. I'm about Caitlin Clark. That's it.
You know where the money,
I don't think the middle school kids really want to read about the inner finances of the. No, but when Michigan went all in,
NIL book. Oh, it's so good.
NIL. It's hard enough to get to read about Caitlin Clark, and she's awesome. And no, Caitlin Clark got a lot of NIL, real NIL.
Yeah, for real.
So that was it because you could clearly see, oh, these guys would have gone pro.
Yeah.
And then you go, well, why do you have Blake Corum's, right? I mean, he had an unbelievable, and he's a great college player. He didn't do much in the NFL.
Right.
But he was a legend. Every big run, there he was, right? They win the national title. Northern teams weren't winning the national title. The only team that could even dream of competing for a national title until about 2 years ago was Ohio State. That was it. Nobody else. Michigan get in the playoff, they lose by 40 points. Michigan State would make Notre Dame get blown out. You couldn't do it. Now you can. So I think that's chapter 1. Game was phenomenal. What was it? 7 lead changes, drama, big time playmakers. The talent popped off the field. The other, traditionally the big Northern games, Ohio State, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. Those are more bloody knuckle affairs, right?
Yep.
We're just gonna, sometimes it's 12-10 and you don't see playmakers everywhere. This felt like an old Miami FSU game or something, LSU Bama. Like you're like, oh man, there are just draft picks everywhere. And then it comes down to this dramatic ending. And I also think you can see, I think we talked about this last thing. I think Oregon and Ohio State are going to have a massive rivalry going forward. This is the start of a big rivalry for the foreseeable future because they're both willing to spend $20 million. And if Michigan and Penn State spend 20 next year, then it'll go to 30, whatever it's going to take. These two are all in to win. And that's what you used to get in the SEC. You talk about active dollar, passive dollar, but like there were 4 or 5, 6 schools, like we're trying to win it all. And I don't know how many teams in the North were, other than Ohio State, were trying to win it all. And I don't even know if they were trying to win it all until Urban Meyer showed up. I think like Tressel, maybe we get it all together. We get some good Ohio boys and we'll, here we go. But not like this.
But I thought like right when we talked about that a couple times when you and I have discussed things like Urban Meyer changed Northern recruiting, Big Ten recruiting. I think maybe this game changes Northern NIL for other people because it already changed for Ohio State and Oregon, but now they see what it can get you and what it takes to compete. So let's play a little game. We'll play this fast. It is to me about the gap. The intention here is not for us to compare how the Oregon offensive line would do against the Texas defensive line, but I just want us to think about, I think in the past, if ever you had done, and they're talking about it again, I just talked about it at the top of the show, Dan, again, this SEC Big Ten challenge that they are talking about, let's schedule it in the non-conference. I said, I talked to Jim Delaney about a Big Ten SEC challenge in 2007. and he poo-pooed me. They should have been doing this for the last 15 years. It would be awesome. But almost always, and I would have understood the Big Ten reluctance, as soon as you start doing it, 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3, you could see somewhat quickly where the SEC would have an edge every time. Maybe 1 versus 1, but by the time you got to 4 versus 4, 5 versus 5, it'd be like, okay, could we actually play Big Ten 4 versus SEC 8? That might be a fair game. You know what I mean? I think the gap is gone. So let's investigate it quickly to answer that question. I just did the first 3 matchups and I tweaked them slightly because it's my show and I can do what I want to do. First one is Texas versus Oregon. Okay. Texas has looked very good, but Dan, the way these teams are viewed, the way they've played, the talent they have, where they are in the sport, is this not pretty equal in your mind? Or do you think there's an edge to Texas here?
I would, this is going to be pretending where the game's played, it's going to be an under 3-point spread, right?
Okay.
And as long as it's an under 3-point spread, I would consider it to be basically a pick 'em at the college level. Oregon didn't look great against Idaho, and they should have lost to Boise State, who's pretty good. But whatever. I watched Texas dominate Michigan, so whatever. Pick 'em game, good game, perfect 1v1.
And programs similar, right? I mean, both certainly success in the past, but ascending with, I think, coaches who are positioned to win. I think they've both proven they can recruit. They're both going to be in on NIL. I think there's a lot of actual similarities.
Lanning has brought a lot of physicality to that Duck program. That like Georgia physicality is now at Oregon. It's not just up tempo. We're going to out athlete you. They've been able to get that.
And Sark has brought a lot of offensive acumen to Texas that they probably needed. So, I mean,
great game. Hope we see it.
But we don't look at Texas, Oregon and be like, oh, of course, SEC, right? And by the way, we're starting with the 2 best teams that are in their first years in the news conference.
Right.
So, like, that's not nothing either. So, good job,
Pac-12,
these guys grabbing
Big
these guys.
12 challenge.
Yeah, it's for real. Can you imagine? I get the Pac-12. I mean, I do feel terrible about this stuff. Like, it's right there. Like, just change the timeline slightly or something. There are 10 different off-ramps that could have maybe changed the future. And like, this makes me sad for the Big 12.
They wanted to do a Big 10 Pac-12 challenge that would have stabilized the Pac-12, and it fell through. Do you remember that? That was proposed.
Yeah, be great.
You don't need to merge. You just need to schedule.
Just play each other. Okay. So the next one I slightly tweaked because I wanted to. Georgia, Ohio State. I don't know that there's a huge difference here. And I didn't want to put Penn State's ranked ahead of Ohio State, but I didn't want to do Penn State, Georgia, because it's like, well, Georgia has more talent. It's like, of course they do. But this, yes, Georgia's won the last 2 national titles. Right now, I think this is a coin toss. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. That's my pick for the national title game before the season. I know they both have a loss. I'm not moving off that could be the national championship game. I saw nothing in those 2 losses, which are basically final minute, on the road, close games that make me go, they're doomed. Yeah. So, yeah.
I think Georgia's going to get the doors blown off by Texas this week and maybe go 9-3. But I don't disagree in principle. Also, Ohio State has some stuff to figure out. Third one is Bama coming down slightly, clearly. They're down from being coached by the greatest coach of all time, and Penn State coming up slightly. And there's nothing in the past that would tell you Bama and Penn State is equal. But right now, for the future, Andy Koltelnicki, James Franklin, maybe like figuring it out a little bit. Kalen DeBoer having a couple bumps. I'm just saying I would take this game on the field, and I would at least give the Big Ten a chance in this one, which you would not have said about any Penn State-Alabama matchup in the past 20 years.
Yeah, there was no chance, and there's no reason to think Penn State can't beat this Alabama team. I guess you're going by the rankings. Some Aggies are going to find you for saying that they're not in first because they have 3 conference wins, but that's fine. I'm checking it now on the ranking. Alabama, Penn State. Yeah, why couldn't Penn State win that game? Yeah, I mean, Alabama's not looking like anything special.
So the point is, our top 3 in the Big Ten and the top 3 in the SEC right now are clear based on AP rankings, based on collective whatever. And I think it's a coin toss across the board, those 3 versus those 3. Are you generally there?
Agree. Absolutely.
Let's do the next clump of 4 and the clump of 4. I think the SEC clump of 4, this is based on AP rankings, that is next, is mostly teams. Maybe Texas A&M lately has come up a little bit because they just beat whoever they just beat, but they do have the Notre Dame loss. So it's Tennessee, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Missouri. And also LSU. I forgot about LSU. LSU can cram it. I always forget about LSU.
So LSU lost to USC.
I know, which why are they 8? They jumped 5 spots because they lost to a 3-loss team.
They beat Ole Miss, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. They lost. It was a close game. Could have gone either way, which is pretty much all of USC's games.
Yeah, but that's all of Minnesota's games, and they're not
going to be scared
8.
By LSU. Not going to be scared by LSU.
LSU, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Missouri. They're ranked between 8 and 19. Okay, so that's 5 there. Or the next 5 in the Big Ten: Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Nebraska, Iowa. They're ranked between 16 and 31. So clearly, the SEC is ranked higher. But especially Tennessee, Ole Miss, Missouri, they, I think, are underachieving based on the preseason and what their fan base has thought. And everybody in the Big Ten, I think, is either Michigan's underachieving, but clearly Illinois and Indiana are overachieving. Nebraska has the 1 loss, but I think Nebraska fans are pretty happy. Here's the point, Dan. Maybe you give an edge to the SEC here, but I would be willing right now to send these 5 Big Ten teams against these 5 SEC teams on the field and feel like they can compete in a much better way than I would have felt 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I think that is the way this will trend. It is going to be much more competitive.
I would agree. I'd give the SEC the edge. I'm looking at that Wisconsin really not being competitive against Alabama. They're playing a little better. Illinois and Nebraska, I want to see more out of.
Yeah.
Because also, both of them could turn out to be very good here. And Indiana, I just don't know. They just haven't played. But yes, I think it's competitive, but I would give the edge in those 5. I don't think Michigan's particularly good. They're ranked.
But I think anything we say about Michigan, for instance, we would absolutely say about Ole Miss and Missouri. I think Ole Miss and Missouri are complete puffery based on transfer portal offseason stuff. They have not done anything on the field.
Agree.
To me this year that would say like, oh, they're scary. And everybody was ready to crown Tennessee because they were dropping 70 on MAC teams. And then
they're not doing that anymore.
Arkansas, brother. And like
Arkansas, and if Florida doesn't lose Graham Mertz in that game, they might beat them. So yeah, I agree. Like, it's much more even.
So so I think it is more even right now at the top of the Big Ten and the SEC and in the middle of the Big Ten and the SEC. I started covering Big Ten football in 2005. This is the most even that it's been, I would say.
I would say top 3 are even, and it wouldn't surprise me if the Big Ten could win all 3 of those games or 2 out of 3. I think this is more even, and I agree. The depth is there. I would make one other point. I think the depth there's 2 levels of parity that NIL has brought on and the transfer portal. One is the number of teams that can win the national championship. We used to go into seasons like 6 years ago with like 3 contenders.
Absolutely.
Like 3 legitimate contenders. And now you're like, well, we'll see with Alabama, Georgia, they're going to play in the SEC title game. But other than that, and Ohio State's going to come out of here, and Clemson. There's maybe LSU gets it together. But there wasn't many. Now you look, and there's like 8, 10 teams. You see in Washington make a title game, TCU making a title game, Michigan winning it all. So there's more teams that can win it all. But what I underestimated was the leveling inside the league of the top. Okay, the middle third, which we're talking about here, and the top third.
Yep.
Because what you saw with Vanderbilt is not only did they get a lot better, but Alabama and Georgia don't have the depth on their lines that they used to. Kids go there for a year or 2, and they're like, I'm not playing. And you know what? I can go over here to play at Ole Miss, and I'm going to get paid, and I'm going to start. Kids want playing time, number one. I can start here. They're seeking playing time and money. You don't sit there and go, I'll just wait 3-4 years at Alabama, and Nick Saban will get me in the league or whatever. I don't really have an option because I got to sit out a year. Now there's better. The middle of these leagues are better than they were. And that is what's making it harder to go undefeated. And then because of that, I think you're getting better options in the middle of the Big Ten. The Big Ten used to really fall off 100%. After 2 to 3 teams.
Yeah.
Now I like I said, we just had Nebraska on. It was a great point. If Raiola doesn't have that one overthrow against Illinois, like who knows where we're at? I mean, they solidly beat a decent Colorado team. Like Nebraska's cooking, and so I just think the middle of these leagues are better, and the Big Ten's middle of the league is much better.
And so the last point is this: is this a blip? Is this a speed bump? Is this a fluke, or is this a trend and the new world?
I see no reason that it is a blip. Okay, so the number one predictor of winning in college athletics through the years, other than commitment, but if you committed, was proximity to talent.
Yes.
Okay, it's why the Big East wins so many national championships, even though they don't. Like Villanova is like it's a mid-sized Catholic school in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Like there's nothing about Villanova that suggests it should be win national. Well, they're close. There's a lot of players in Philadelphia, New Jersey, and New York, right? The Big East can be great at basketball. Proximity to talent is your number one predictor, or you can overcome that with tremendous commitment, the way a Kentucky basketball does or whatever. So there are more good players in the South, Texas, and all that than there are in the North. It just is. There's some pockets. Like I think Detroit has more NFL players than any other city, but you get outside of Metro Detroit, ain't a whole lot of players in the state of Michigan. So you think about anything in life when companies are trying to recruit people, what would make you move? Why you said if your neighbor says, I'm moving, I'm going to move to San Francisco for a job. Really? Why? Well, they're going to pay me 30% more. You got to do it, right? Or this opportunity. The active dollar solves some of the problems.
Active dollar.
The active dollar. Clemson is in a lot better shape than Purdue because Clemson's sitting right by Atlanta, and now it still helps to be right by Atlanta. But if you can pay, you sit there and go, well, there's no players around Purdue. Well, maybe we can get some guys because you can say, hey, man, I go up here. I'm going to play. I'm going to get some money. So the North can spend that active dollar and overcome the geographical and maybe traditional problems that they had of being a near enough players. The Midwest kind of gets picked through by Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, and Notre Dame. You can overcome that. Like if Wisconsin is sitting there saying, man, we never get a great quarterback. They want a good quarterback, pool your money and go get one.
Yeah. This is the title: Activating the Active Northern Dollar.
There it is. That's our book. But if we make it a TikTok, it'll be a lot more popular.
I can dance a little bit. Can you dance?
No, we don't make any money on TikTok, so it's not a good deal.
Activating the active Northern dollar. We'll make it a thing that people will do. All right, Dan, always fun. We'll see you next Tuesday, man.
Appreciate it. Talk to you then.
We'll be back right after this on KOTN. Back on Kings of the North. Thanks to Dan Wetzel as that for that as always. Last thing we're going to do here on this show, we're going to go a little over. I mean, what else is new? This is your Farmageddon prep. This is Kansas State at Iowa State to end the regular season on November 30th. And we want to talk about what's happening with these teams right now. Iowa State this week is at Central Florida. Kansas State is at West Virginia. But it's about what these teams can be, what this rivalry is and can be. And I just think they are super interesting. So we're going to go back to back with these interviews. Alex Gilbert and Alec Busse talking about the teams they cover. I'll come back at the end just to say goodbye. We will see you guys on Wednesday. Landis and I will do the midseason All-North team. We were working it out on Monday night. I think we have 54. We did first and second team. We did a couple extra positions, the best teams in Northern College football. We will also talk on Wednesday with Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South about the two big Southern matchups this weekend. Who in the South the North should be afraid of? We've got Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia, Texas this weekend. Then on Thursday's show, as always, picks and previews for the coming weekend. I think we will focus on Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana, Nebraska for our big game breakdowns. But for now, let's get into what's ahead for Kansas State and Iowa State on Kings of the North. Joined now by Ryan Gilbert, the managing editor of GoPowerCat.com. How do you guys normally say that? Do you say it like that? I love the name. Is there a way you say it?
You know what? We usually just go with Go Power Cat, but I kind of like that. We might have to implement a little change there. So you're onto something.
Yeah, couple extra O's. But GoPowerCat.com on the website, on the web world is where you can find it. Ryan has been covering Kansas State for about 4 years, and we are very excited to talk about the Wildcats here because this has been a crazy year of Kansas State football. It's so exciting, and I will say this. Coming off this win at Colorado, I don't know if anybody has played 3 tougher, more interesting, wild road games than Kansas State. At Tulane, like a very competitive Tulane team that was right there. Kansas State wins by 7. Just get blitzed at BYU. And then find a way to win this game at Colorado in a crazy environment. I think you could look at the road games for Kansas State and be like, I don't know, but like I look at those 3 road games and I have respect for Kansas State for finding a way to go 2-1 in those. What have you thought of these road trips, man?
Well, I'm finally, K-State finally got the monkey off of its back, really, with that road win at Colorado. And you mentioned it, Tulane was an ugly win, and give all the credit in the world to the Green Wave, a really good game. Darian Mensah was probably the better quarterback in that game over Avery Johnson, but K-State still played a pretty sloppy game, lucky to come out of New Orleans with a win. And then, you mentioned it, getting blitzed really in Provo. I mean, things just snowballed and went from bad to worse in a heartbeat for Kansas State in that game. But that game against Colorado from Saturday really was, K-State finally just got the monkey off of its back, like I said, one away from home, because I think anybody following this team knows that K-State truly can beat anybody inside of Bill Snyder Family Stadium. The last couple of years, Chris Kleiman has been tremendous at home, but away from home, K-State struggled, bluntly put. And obviously that win against Colorado was another roller coaster. It was not one for the faint of heart. K-State was up for a good chunk of that fourth quarter. And then out of nowhere, you've got an Avery Johnson interception and almost gets returned for a touchdown. Colorado cashes in immediately. The home crowd's going crazy. Awesome environment, I must say. Colorado, K-State fans, I know that there was some things to not be happy about. I get that 100%, but a sellout late night, after dark, it was a great place to play. And so obviously K-State got it done. A 50-yard bomb to Jace Brown was kind of the go-ahead touchdown at the end. And, K-State proved that with its back against the wall, when the momentum was with the home team, K-State finally learned how to respond from that and not hit the panic buttons, be mature. That was something they did in Boulder, wasn't able to do it in Provo.
Do you think most or many Kansas State fans in that situation, after the pick on 4th down, Colorado cashes it in, Kansas State's coming back on the field with 3 minutes left or whatever it was, did they think Kansas State was going to find a way to win? Or do you think that is the way it's been, as you described it, Kansas State fans were like, man, this is happening again. I can't believe we're blowing this.
I think there's always some optimism, right? But by and large, man, going through, social media live as it was happening, I think most fans are like, all right, seen this before. And so, I even tweeted out, I think I said, or X'd out, I said, welp. Like that was all I said after that Colorado touchdown. Like, here we go again. Yeah. And, I mentioned it wasn't just this year. The last couple of years, Chris Kleiman has just struggled on the road. And so, I think everybody outside of that sideline was panicking, but I mentioned it, that sideline, the offense as a whole, Avery Johnson, who is a true sophomore, stayed poised and obviously stepped up in a big way.
So Avery Johnson, it's first incompletion on that drive, and then a nice little scheme to free up DJ Giddens wide open for a 34-yard gain, and then this shot down the sideline to Jace Brown, who boxes out the corner. Avery Johnson throws a nice ball for a 50-yard touchdown. super talented, has been coming along, right? The last couple games as a passer a little bit. What have you thought of the overall progress of Avery Johnson? It's been an interesting situation for Kansas State where I think everybody saw them as a legit Big 12 title contender and playoff contender coming into this year, but they're also playing a super talented second-year player who really hasn't done much before. It's like you're trying to win while you're simultaneously trying to develop. How has Avery Johnson developed through 6 games?
Playing as a true sophomore, he's developed fine, and I'm sure there's fans that would like to see more out of Avery Johnson, without a doubt. But with him being such a young player, a lot of fans were maybe upset or frustrated with the beginning of the season for Kansas State. Many thought that the playbook wasn't fully being opened up, and I think that that's true to an extent. You can always be critical of a play caller, but at the end of the day, Avery Johnson being such a young quarterback, you can't throw everything on him all at once. So they're having to ease things with him, and that's totally fine. He's been okay with that. He's obviously missed some throws. Without a doubt, Avery Johnson hasn't been perfect, whether that's a misfire or that's just an interception or a poor decision. He hasn't been perfect, but I think, I'm always a believer that a team's record is largely reflective of a quarterback's play. And so K-State's only lost 1 game. Johnson's made some big plays. And Johnson wasn't totally to blame for what happened in Provo against BYU, because seemingly everything went wrong. But Johnson didn't help. He kind of let things snowball, like I mentioned, and so he showed some great maturity really from that game on. You go back to the Oklahoma State game, sandwiched between the Colorado game and the BYU game. K-State had Avery Johnson thrown an interception, and then Oklahoma State had hit a nice flea flicker for a touchdown. And people are thinking, okay, here we go again. But obviously K-State was calm, cool, and collected, and didn't let that affect them. And then the same thing kind of happened, like I said, against Colorado at the very end. And it's interesting, you mentioned that first incompletion on that drive was to Jace Brown. They have that play to DJ Giddens, and the third play of that drive was pretty much an identical play to Jace Brown. They knew they had a one high look and man coverage to Jace Brown, and so they were going to keep going to that. And so, credit K-State for coming out on top. And like I said, Avery Johnson deserves a lot of he takes a big part in those victories.
You could see, I thought it was sort of classic what a quarterback like that can do for you. The first touchdown, 4th and 4 from the 8, an unblocked blitzer is in the backfield immediately on 4th and 4, and Avery Johnson just runs the other way and runs in for a touchdown. It's like, okay, like that was quite good. And yes, you've got to make throws when it matters, but was that to me was like, okay, like there is something about this dude, right? That this guy can make winning plays.
Yeah. And I just went and talked about everything good and bad with throwing, but I, certainly would be remiss, and I really am, of not touching on what he can do with his legs, because that's what really Avery Johnson's at his best, when he's hurting you on the ground. DJ Giddens is without a doubt one of the most underrated running backs in the entire conference, in the entire country. And so he kind of steals the spotlight with what K-State does on the ground. But Avery Johnson's threat with his legs makes him a true dual threat quarterback. And, a lot of people think dual threat, they just think, oh, he's just a running quarterback. No, Avery Johnson can do both. You look at his high school tape and he's just, not even thinking and just running around and playing. That's truly when he's at his best. And so, we saw a couple designed runs for Avery Johnson, as we've seen all year. But his ability, when he's getting pressured, flush out of the pocket, create something with his legs, that's when Avery Johnson can really hurt you. So if he can get some of those passing, miscues out of his system, him running the football has been great. And that's also one more thing to consider here real quick, is just that, not that K-State's backup is bad, because Taquan Roberson came in for a little less than a series and made one big throw. But so he was serviceable. He was fine. Don't get me wrong, but they do want to keep him healthy. And so that's maybe a reason that, along with kind of easing him into things, you don't want your quarterback getting hurt when he runs it so much.
I think Chris Kleiman talked about this the other week, but just to be able to build an offense around DJ Giddens and Dylan Edwards. DJ Giddens the last 2 weeks, 15 for 187, 25 for 182. I thought a great example of it, right? DJ Giddens had like a run on third down to convert a third down in the red zone. Then Dylan Edwards comes in, fights through multiple tackles to get down to the one, then cashes it in. That running game with those two guys and this offensive line, like when you're trying to ease a young quarterback into it, man, those are two good dudes to kind of build an offense around in the meantime, right?
Absolutely. And that drive you mentioned with Edwards punching it in, I think it was 8 plays, but it was 60 yards. 50 of them came from DJ Giddens on the ground. 10 came from Dylan Edwards on the ground. So they didn't have to even pass the football for that entire drive. And that's when Johnson was in. And so if you're a quarterback, that makes your job just so much easier to have that rushing attack.
All right, going to West Virginia this week, man. This is like another one. I was at West Virginia for a game earlier this year. They have a great home schedule this year, actually, and played some bangers there. Just had Iowa State in there this past week. This is like another test, but do you think, you called it a hurdle? Does this Kansas State team now go on the road for West Virginia? Does this Kansas State fan base watch this team go on the road and just feel different because of what they managed to do at Colorado, as Shedeur Sanders threw for 380, as they had a lead and lost a lead and came back and won that game? Is this transformative for Kansas State, the road team?
Yeah, in my opinion, yes. I did an article with kind of 5 things I learned from the game, and the last point I made was K-State's Big 12 title hopes are truly tangible now, right? K-State, you can say all you want about the schedule and what was ahead and how crazy the Big 12 is, but until I could see this team win away from home, you just couldn't feel comfortable with that. And so finally they got that. I haven't dug a whole lot into West Virginia, obviously, yet, but that's a game that I know Chris Kleiman's excited about. In the past, he's talked about. It's not necessarily a rivalry or anything like that, but he's got respect for Neil Brown and that program, and so should be a nice test. And this is an interesting game. K-State's coming off of a very, very emotional victory over Colorado. Dylan Edwards, his former team, that place was rocking, and now you go on the road, and that game is going to be before a game against Kansas. Now I know KU has not been what we thought it would be this year. Certainly, without a doubt, but they've lost. I mean, they've got a positive point differential. They've lost they've been in every loss till the very end for the most part. And so KU's still a good team, but I haven't mentioned that this is a huge rivalry game coming into this year. I mean, this was thought to be the game of the year. Yeah. And so it still could be. I'm sure KU, if you're Lance Leipold, it wouldn't, you could convince if you look at the Big 12, you could convince your team that a Big 12 title isn't out of the question with how crazy this conference has been. And so this game is really sandwiched between 2 big games for K-State.
All right, so let's jump ahead then. Farmageddon last year, everybody watched because it was in the snow and it was crazy and it was awesome and it was fun. Farmageddon this year could be like number 3 against number 7. I'm not trying to but it could. I think at the very least, one of the teams between Kansas State and Iowa State will be playing to get into the Big 12 title game in that game in the last weekend of the regular season. And it could be both. It could be that maybe one's locked up a spot and the other gets in with the win. Like, again, it's a tight conference. I do think this is nothing against BYU, and BYU has been excellent. The odds show it too. Iowa State right now is plus 160 to win the Big 12. Kansas State's plus 350. BYU plus 500. I think Iowa State and Kansas State might be the 2 best teams in the Big 12. And again, BYU deserves all the flowers so far. Can we even fathom what that's going to be like if that's legitimately a top 10 matchup with Big 12 title game and playoff implications between the Cyclones and Wildcats?
Be crazy, wouldn't it be? And I think that your mark, it was kind of intentional. Like Oklahoma State, Utah played early. Oklahoma State, K-State played early. Like you go down the list, like Arizona played Utah. Like the teams that were thought to be at the top played early, and I think they wanted to avoid some sort of like weird tiebreaker scenario in the end of the year. Well, I think they might get that, with K-State and Iowa State, those 2 teams, unless something goes south for other programs, like they're going to be in it till the very end. And so that should be a heck of a game. You mentioned it last year. Like, it was fun for Iowa State. The snow, it was all great, but that was a forgetful one for the Wildcats. I mean, you had players that knew they were transferring. They were eyeing the portal. Not everyone was in it for Kansas State, unfortunately, in that game. But Iowa State came to play and put on a show on the ground with Sama. I can't remember his name, the running back.
Yeah, Abu Sama. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So, I mean, it's just a crazy game. And so I'm sure K-State's going to be wanting revenge in that last game of the regular season.
And then we get to do it in Dublin to open 2025. Like Farmageddon's taking over the world, man. It could be like one of the biggest games on the last weekend and one of the biggest games on the first weekend the next week. This is a super fun team. How are the fans enjoying this? Like, what's the K-State fan base like right now with what this team has done and what this team could do?
Well, there was a lot of fans at the game in Boulder. And so, fan support's very high. And you look at basketball, what Jerome Tang has done. I think that the two staffs with football and basketball have really paired well together. The programs have so much momentum right now. And, fans are excited. Fans are excited. Certainly. I know some people that have booked a refundable trip just in case, but, the trip to Arlington, in early December for that Big 12 matchup and title matchup. And so a lot of football left, certainly, but, fans are excited.
Yeah. Got to be prepared, man. Got to be prepared. I mean, it could be an expensive December for Kansas State fans, right? So unless, they win the whole thing and then you get a bye and you don't have to worry about it. You get it. But there's going to be some traveling ahead for Kansas State fans, I think. So Ryan Gilbert, you can find him at gopowercat.com.
I like that.
Great Kansas State coverage, and this is a super fun and interesting team to follow. And Ryan, thanks for your time here on Kings of the North.
Thank you.
Joined now by Alec Busse of CycloneAlert.com. It's in the 24/7 network. I always like to say, Alec, just like what people can type in the Google machine to find your stuff, right? So Cyclone Alert will get them to you.
It will. Thank you for having me on. If you want to Google Iowa State 24/7, we'll come up right at there that way too. But yeah, it's all the website names can be tricky to remember.
Yeah. So it all redirects to the same place. Just put in Alec's name. You'll find him. When I asked Alec to be on the show to talk about Iowa State, he responded and said, Kings of the North is my favorite show. It is the greatest honor of my life to be a guest on this show. No, that is actually not what he said. He said, I casually listened to your show. And I was like, we will take it. You've listened to this show before, Alec?
I have. Yeah, I've listened to a few episodes here and there. I'm a huge fan of one of your big friends, Ari Wasserman.
Oh, my God.
One of our big competitors. But every time Ari's on a show, I try and listen to it. He's great entertainment. I listened to that one where you guys did like the quarterback draft.
Yeah.
You, Bill, and Ari. I found that one to be quite entertaining. And I also listened to one a little bit earlier this season when I was just like making and eating dinner. I was like, oh, that came across my YouTube. I was like, I'll click on that and watch that as I cook and eat. So yeah, it's great entertainment. I love your energy. So it's cool to be on.
I feel like I shouldn't have asked. You love Ari. And if you happen to have a little time for us, you'll squeeze us in. No, Ari is a great guy. Everybody knows that.
He's the best. He's hilarious. I know people don't always love him, but like there's very few things that guy has that have not sat well with me. He's hilarious.
Okay, that is way too much Ari talk for this show. We'll probably cut that part out. We'll cut that part out, Alec, because we want to talk about the Iowa State Cyclones. How good of a win did you think that was at West Virginia? I thought that could have been a huge, get in there and you get mountaineered.
Yeah, I actually think it's their best win of the season. It's definitely in the conversation with the win at Iowa back in week 2 when they came back to beat Iowa 20-19. I just think that with everything at stake on Saturday against West Virginia, it's probably their best win. And I thought they played their best game of the season against a more challenging opponent on Saturday in the 28-16 win over West Virginia. So for me, that's why I kind of have it number 1 right now. You were still betting favorite. You were an underdog at Iowa. But all things considered, with the way Rocco Beck played, with the way Carson Hansen got into the end zone 3 times and had 96 yards, and the defense, despite having lots of injuries, was still able to keep West Virginia under 20 points. That's a pretty impressive overall performance for me.
So we love the skill for Iowa State coming into this season, but it's not like this. They're undefeated, but it's not like it's gone perfectly. You mentioned all the injuries on defense, especially at linebacker. They've basically played 3 different running backs during the course of the season, and whoever they put in, they find a guy somewhere in a game who's going to be able to run the ball. I think maybe you would, if you're from afar and you think, oh, Iowa State's 6-0, everything must be falling into place. And I feel like they're 6-0, even though not everything has fallen into place. Is that true?
Yeah, especially with the injury list that you kind of talked about. Early in the year, they had to battle Their projected starting left tackle, Jalen Travis, a transfer from Princeton, not being available. Sorry, I'm getting a call from some telemarketer.
It's probably Ari. It's probably Ari.
No, see, if it was, I may have had to answer. No, sorry. Some like senior insurance thing keeps calling me, so I'm sorry to have that interrupt. But yeah, they started the season with a projected starting left tackle, Jalen Travis, unavailable, with a lower body injury that he transferred to the program with from Princeton. But he's come into the lineup the last 3 weeks, started against Houston, I believe. And he's played well. He's assured the offensive line. It's improved each week since his return. They actually lost their starting left guard at West Virginia, so we'll have to see if he's able to return. But defensively is where it's just like it's getting long and it's almost like a joke. Like it can't get any worse for them, especially at linebacker. The Carson Willich tore his ACL in the spring. Caleb Bacon suffered a pretty serious injury in week 1. They have very little hope, but some hope that he can return before the end of the season. I think he only played 5 snaps in that game. Will McLaughlin hasn't played at all because of a back injury that he sustained during training camp. True freshman Kilber Zena, someone that they're super high on. He got hurt against Baylor at the end of the first quarter. He didn't play at West Virginia. They've also lost Jacob Ellis, I believe. He got hurt at linebacker against West Virginia. So they're down like 5 of their top 6 or 7 linebackers at this point, which is just like hard to even think about. And when you're a program like Iowa State that doesn't recruit, top even like 40, 50 classes very often, that's really hard to replace, but they've done a good job of it.
So I think they're like the 5th best team in the country. I have them in my top. I would have them in my top 5. I get all ranty. LSU jumped them this week, even though LSU lost a 3-loss USC and beat at home in overtime a completely fraudulent Ole Miss team. People who watch the show have heard me say that before. I can't believe LSU's ahead of Iowa State. If I say to you they're the 5th best team in the country, would you say, I see it every day, Doug, that's a bit much? Or would you come along for the ride?
I think I would say that's a bit much just for right now. Who do you have ahead of them?
And that'll do it. Thanks for joining us, Alec. We'll talk to you next time. Just kidding. You're allowed to be honest.
Because I'm curious. And directly behind them, I guess, is a better question. Who do you have directly behind them?
Georgia and Bama, because they can cram it. So so we're playing the game of like, is Iowa State better than Georgia, Bama? I just really am impressed when you start like from a resume ranking standpoint to win at Iowa. And I think Iowa is legit to win at West Virginia. And then in their other games, just like handle their business, right? They shut out Houston, like just that kind of stuff of they've played good teams and found a way to win. And then they've handled their business the rest of the time. And I think both sides of the ball, solid defense despite the injuries. The thing I like about them is that they feel very solid to me and explosive. Like they do everything right, and they have 2 of the most dangerous receivers in the country, and Rocco Becht is a dude. So that's the thing that I think there's a lot of times when you're explosive, you're also a little nuts. And I feel like they're not nuts, but they are dangerous.
I feel like I'm comfortable predicting them to be the best team in the Big 12 comfortably. Right now, I know BYU's undefeated and they're 16th or 14th in the country in the AP poll. But that being said, for whatever reason, I just can't get all the way there with BYU. And they've, I think, covered every game this year that they've played, which is not that BYU's done that. But
that's fine. I agree with you. Like all credit to BYU, but do I think Iowa State's a better football team? Yes. And happy for BYU to prove us wrong. But I agree with where you're at.
Yeah, I think Iowa State should be viewed as a no doubt Big 12 favorite right now. Okay. And I think their schedule is favorable enough that they should probably start 10-0, which is crazy to say for a school that's never won 10 games. They've got UCF coming up this weekend. They then play Texas Tech, who's undefeated, I believe, still in Big 12 play. That'll be a somewhat tough game, but it's at Jack Trice Stadium, and Iowa State's just so good at home. It's a difficult place to play. KU is probably one of the biggest disappointments in the country. That game's at Arrowhead, so they should get KU. And then Cincinnati, who I actually think might be sneaky good, also comes to Jack Trice Stadium. An interesting storyline with that, Cincinnati's defensive coordinator, Tyson Veit, is a former staffer at Iowa State, was a linebackers coach for forever under Matt Campbell. So that's kind of an interesting storyline, but I think Iowa State's better than all of these teams before they go on the road and play at Utah, and then they end the regular season against K-State. I think they can win both of those games too. Am I going to project them going undefeated? I don't know. That seems like a little far off there, but I think they can win every single one of these games.
So let's talk about it then. Farmageddon. Last year, it was in the snow. It was fun. It was cool. It was crazy. And this year, it could just be huge. It could be between two teams, maybe in the top 10 by that point of the season. It definitely will impact the Big 12 title game. At least one of those two teams is going to be like in a win and you're in situation for the Big 12 title game. I think both. I think the idea that we see a rematch in the Big 12 title game is not off the table. How gigantic. We just had a Kansas State writer on. So, like, we're getting people prepped. Farmageddon, people, get ready for this. How huge could this be, Alec?
I think it's potentially one of the biggest games of the year that no one is talking about because it's the last weekend of the regular season and it gets overshadowed by the game, the Iron Bowl, Notre Dame, USC, Texas and Texas A&M play that weekend as well. But with all of the stakes that could be on this game at the end of the regular season, especially if it's to go to the Big 12 title game, like winner goes to the Big 12 title game. Oh God, it's just be incredible. There are two schools that I've actually had the pleasure of covering. I covered K-State the year they won the Big 12 in 2022. So I think I have a unique perspective of the rivalry. It's two schools to me that are just very, very similar in the way that they behave, they invest in football. They both want to be good in football. They both have similar head coaches with philosophies and all those different kind of things. All things considered, I think it would be a riveting matchup in the regular season, especially with the way the last two have gone. Because the 2022 one in Jack Tribe's was a 10-9 final score, and then last year's was a 42-35. So completely different games. But I think it'd be a fascinating game, and I'm certainly kind of hoping that it has all those implications.
So we did a rivalry show a week ago, and I was listing the 10 most important rivalries for college football right now, like familiarity, dislike, but also it matters. And I had Farmageddon in the top 5, and Dan Wetzel, who was on with me, was asking, do they hate each other enough? Do Kansas State and Iowa State hate each other, or are they similar and they respect each other and they've played for more than 100 years?
I think it's a really good question. I think their fans were both on each side really frustrated when the Big 12 decided to not protect that rivalry when the conference expanded to 16 teams. And I know that they're playing in this year, 25 and 26, but they're going to take a break in 2027. It'll be a 1-year break. It'll be the first time they haven't played in about 100 years. So that's just something that's weird and wrong and a travesty of realignment, especially in a conference like the Big 12, where realignment has just killed so many of the league's rivalries. Like Mizzou and Kansas has ended. Bedlam has ended. I guess you bring Colorado back and you have that one. Nebraska leaves and you lose so many in that situation too. But this is one that has stuck around and should be played every year. And I don't really understand why Brett Yormark didn't protect it, because it should be it would be fine. I don't think anyone would complain about the two schools having it protected. That being said, they don't like each other. The fan bases don't like each other. I think it's kind of one of those situations where the schools are very similar. Like I said, and I think it's kind of like your brother, right? Where you can pick on your brother, but no one else can pick on your brother, even though you guys are super similar. I think it's kind of one of those. And it's a ton of fun. I will say, I think each school has more hate in their heart for another school. K-State hates KU more, and I think Iowa State hates Iowa more. So maybe that takes away from it just a little tiny bit. But it is a great rivalry, and it's one that I feel in the last few years, with the nickname of Farmageddon coming around, has started to get more national attention.
Good. Plus, they're going to Ireland. You going to go to Ireland next year?
I'm hoping to, 24/7 has said that they plan to send me, so that'll be a good experience. I don't know if you've ever been, but give me some tips if you've got any.
Never been to Ireland. I'm kind of hoping maybe I'll be there too. So we'll see. Let's see how good the Farmageddon is this year. All right. So you watch it every game. How good is this Rocco Becht, Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins trio as a passing attack?
I think it's one of the best in the Big 12. Is it Shadur and Jimmy Horn and Travis Hunter? No. But I don't think that there's another one that's better than it. It's a lot of fun to watch. It became a ton of fun to watch a season ago, especially in the second half of the year. Rocco Becht has thrown a touchdown pass in 10 straight games. Jaden Higgins had a touchdown in 7 of those games. So that just kind of shows you the dynamic that those two have. And Jalen Noel has turned into, I think, one of the best receivers in the country that no one knows about. Higgins gets a lot of the attention, but Noel is just so reliable. He's always open, really trusty hands, is a team captain, someone that Matt Campbell speaks about highly, just as highly as anyone on his roster. So all things considered, I think it's maybe the second best group in the Big 12, and the only one it's behind is potentially the team with the first quarterback taken in the NFL draft. and probably the best player in the sport. So like, can you really ding him too much for being the second best passing duo trio in the conference? No, you can't.
You take that. Tyler Mauser running this offense after Nathan Shieldhouse left for the NFL. What Matt Campbell has been able to do with kind of having a staff that every now and then, like somebody will get taken, but they keep doing their thing. Did you think, were there concerns about this offense? Or did everyone, I mean, it seems like Mauser's got a handle on it. Did everybody assume that would be the case?
Yeah, they didn't change much of their scheme. They added a few different things. Mauser has made it pretty clear that he wanted to get vertical a little bit more in the passing game because they were really explosive last season. And I think that's something that they've worked into the offense, but the overall scheme is pretty similar. He's never called plays before. And one of the reasons why I think the offense has been able to sustain success is because the overall offensive staff does have a lot of people who have called plays. Their offensive line coach, Ryan Clanton, called plays at Northern Iowa before he was at Iowa State. Their running backs coach, Tyler Roll, who was hired away from North Dakota State prior to this season, has experience calling plays. So does Noah Pauley, another former NDSU assistant, who's their wide receivers coach. So you combine all those guys, and they have a lot of experience calling plays. And then Matt Campbell, obviously, he got his start as an offensive coordinator at Toledo before taking over the head coaching duties, I think in 2014, when Tim Beckman took the Illinois job. So it's an offensive staff that pretty much has a lot of continuity and a lot of good play calling experience. I think Mauser can rely on when he needs to.
What do you think of Matt Campbell?
I think he's a really good coach. I think he's one of the best people in the industry too. I think a lot of people hear some of the things he says and question his commitment to like winning and all of those things. He's one of the most competitive coaches I've ever covered. It just maybe doesn't always come off that way. And at the same time, he cares so much about developing the human and developing the player. And I have so much respect for that. And he's so comfortable in his skin. He's so comfortable in being the head coach at Iowa State, and he takes so much pride in being able to do it what he believes is the right way. I think he's one of the best coaches in the Big 12. And I think his star is really starting to begin to shine again because this team is 6-0, probably should be 7-0 after this weekend against UCF. And again, should have an opportunity to win the Big 12 and go to the college football playoff.
So he's already Iowa State's all-time leading winner as a head coach. His name has often been out there in coaching carousel stuff. So Iowa State has a great year. Jump or stay and win 200 games and be the Kirk Ferentz or Bill Snyder of Iowa State? What would you advise Matt Campbell to do?
If I was advising him, I think I would tell him to stay because I think he's found the formula to winning at Iowa State, and no one else has really ever been able to find it. Dan McCarney did a really good job here, won 56 games in his tenure at Iowa State. But Matt Campbell's done it at a higher level. He has the highest winning percentage in school history as well. Tops Earl Bruce, who obviously left to coach at Ohio State back in the day. I think that I would tell him to stay, and I think he's kind of started to come to the decision that it would have to be like the perfect opportunity for him to leave and find a new job that allows him to do it his way and allows him to approach things the way that he wants to approach them. I think fit is so important for him. If he were to take another job, I don't think he would want to go to a school that has a massive donor base that is involved in the day-to-day decisions of the program and all of those different things. But if he does decide to go somewhere, you often hear like the question when you go from a school like Iowa State that doesn't have the richest tradition or the greatest access to talent, well, can that guy recruit at a high level? I do think he can go to a school and recruit at a respectable level relative to that school's history, because I just think he understands talent evaluation, because I don't think you can win 59 games at Iowa State if you don't understand talent evaluation. I would tell him to stay and continue to build a legacy, but I also think if he left, Iowa State fans would have enough love in their heart for everything that he's given them over the last decade.
Look at you. We're talking about hate. We're talking about love. So do you still like Ari more than me, or have I passed him?
I've never been on one of Ari's shows, so I think you may be topping him there.
See, what are we doing here? Okay. I would tell him to stay too. Stay for the statue. Stay to be the person that redefines Iowa State football. And in this environment, I mean, this season is proof of it. That you're not just like trying to upset somebody. You're not just like trying to backdoor into the Fiesta Bowl or something. Like, go be good and get to the playoff and take your shot. So this, I think the way this Big 12 has worked out, I I don't know why this wouldn't be sustainable. He certainly has done it before. I think he can continue to do it, and the grass isn't always greener. So
I would just, if I could say one thing too here in relation to this, if he's going to leave for a job, I think it would take, like I said, a really good fit, but also it would take a school that wants to take a chance on him. And I also question if Iowa State is a better job than some of the schools that I could see wanting to take a chance on him. Like over your right shoulder, like you have the Notre Dame banner. I think he would love to be Notre Dame's head coach. What guy who grows up in the Midwest doesn't want to be Notre Dame's coach? Everyone wants to coach at Notre Dame, except Brian Kelly at the end. But that's beside the point. I think that Notre Dame would be a school he would love to coach at, but does Notre Dame want him, and is Notre Dame a better job? You have Michigan State. Right. It looks like, is Michigan State a better job than Iowa State? I don't know in this landscape of things. I think your path to winning at Iowa State is just as easy as it is at Michigan State now. Getting to the playoff at Iowa State is maybe just as easy as it is at Michigan State. And I think this whole dynamic is something that a lot of coaches are going to have to start to evaluate and really decide on if that's best for him. And I think he's in a position where he knows what he has here is awesome, and it works perfectly well for him.
Yeah. No, I think it's right. Like Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, maybe Penn State. Like those would be the ones that it's like, okay, well, if they would come calling, but like, would they? And then even if they did, you would want to make sure it's the right situation. And then other than that, I don't know that you're going to have a better chance of winning and a better chance of being happier than what he has right now in Ames. All right. He's Alec Busse. You can find him at the 24/7 network covering Ohio State, not Ohio State, Iowa State. See, now you have Matt Campbell. I have Matt Campbell on the brain. His name has popped up like in Ohio State, like it's, Matt Campbell, Ohio guy. So, Alec, thank you for your time. And please continue to casually listen to Kings of the North.
No, we'll make it a more regular habit. I'll make it my nightly routine as I'm eating and making dinner, because I did it one time. It was great entertainment.
That is our new strategy for gaining viewers and listeners, is to just have everybody on. It's like, yeah, well, be on and then just watch us from then on. So, all right.
That's how it works.
Very nice talking to you.
People being involved in the party.
I always said like the best thing a newspaper could ever do is just run like 10 pages of the phone book every day, and you wouldn't tell people what day their name's going to be in the paper, and you just would have to buy the paper to be like, am I in there today? Nope. I guess I'll buy it tomorrow. So that's the new strategy for KOTN. Maybe you will be on tomorrow's show, viewer.
Maybe. We'll see.
Alec, thanks for your time, man.
Thank you for having me.
Wow, too long. So I'm not even being facetious here. I actually have a thing that I want to do that, like at some point we would have viewers on. I'll tell you what it is, just to the people who are here at the end. If you lasted an hour and 50 minutes, I would like to start doing segments called My Favorite Fan, where viewers tell us the person in their life who is their favorite sports fan, is the sports fan that got them to love sports. Might be a family member, might be a neighbor, might be somebody they sit next to a lot at the games. Because so many people, I think if you like sports enough to watch a show like this, there's somebody that made you that way. And so maybe they were formative for you. Maybe you were already a sports fan and you met them later, but you just like the way they're a fan. So my favorite fan is the way that someday we will actually have you guys on this show with us. All right. Thanks for hanging in. Sorry it went over. Wednesday, All North team. Breaking down a little bit of the big Southern games this week. Thursday, picks and previews for all the Northern games as usual. Saturday night, 11 p.m., live on YouTube, KOTN late night, wrapping up the games right when they finish on Saturday. Thanks as always to our producer, Mike Yorostowski, for making us look good and sound good. Thanks to all the guests this week. That's Dan Wetzel of Yahoo Sports. That's Zack Carpenter covering Nebraska, Ryan Gilbert, covering Kansas State, and Alec Busse covering Iowa State for now. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.